coming up to Kearney today. My name is Will Keith. I am with the Alliance for the Future of Agriculture in Nebraska. I'd like to welcome you to the 2019 Nebraska Confined Cattle Conference here. This is the third year of the event. The first year we've had it in Kearney. We're excited to have a great new venue, beautiful facility here today. I want to recognize a few of our sponsors that really helped us put it together. You'll hear from a lot of them throughout the week, but Central Confinement Services of Columbus, been great friends, great partners of us the past 3 or 4 years as we've worked to put this on. Aki Steel out of Audubon, Iowa, who you'll hear from later this evening. The Nebraska Cattlemen, who are in the back of the room. I believe their new president will be speaking with us tomorrow afternoon. And then Setchi Agri-Services of Raymond, who helped sponsor the reception here this evening. So let's give them a round of applause and thank them for their support of the event. With that, I think we're going to go ahead and get started today. Our first speaker of the afternoon is Morgan Hayes. Morgan is with the University of Kentucky, Lexington, where she is an assistant professor of extension with specializing in livestock facility design and ventilation. So I'd like to invite Morgan up to the stage.
Perfect, thank you. Let me go to somewhere where I can actually see my slides so I know what I'm talking about. It's a pleasure to be here in Nebraska. I've been at the last couple cattle confinement meetings here in Nebraska. I actually lived in Hastings for a few years, and in Iowa for a few years before that. So it's a pleasure to be back. I was glad it didn't snow too much yesterday. I don't know how to drive that anymore. I live in Kentucky now. So my talk today, getting started in confinement, just the basic facility considerations and ventilation considerations. Sort of an overview. I really wanted to just hit on why we're talking about confinement. What are people who contact me asking me about confinement? Why do they want to go and build a barn? And then a little bit about the types of barns. You'll see a lot of these here, the types of barns. My job is to give you sort of an unbiased view of what the types of barns are and why they're available. I want to talk about spacing needs. One of the biggest challenges with managing a barn is making sure we have the right spacing for the animals to really grow, because the barn is there to make us more efficient. And then some facility and ventilation concerns, because in my mind this is the one area where if we don't get it right, it will bite us in the butt every single time. And then just my final thoughts. So why confinement? Land availability and pricing is probably the biggest driver. Sometimes it's not that the land isn't available, and sometimes it's the land is just not there. There's a lot of seasonal reasons to consider confinement. Where I live, mud is absolutely the primary one. Around here, it could be cold stress, could be heat stress. It just depends on where you live as to what is that challenge in the environment that we can control by putting the animal in the barn. Drought is a big one. Some people would say that's a seasonal issue, but from the perspective that the barn provides us an opportunity to manage our feed more efficiently, drought is something that we can somewhat manage with barn. In fact, the reason that cow-calf confinement really picked up was in around 2012 in Texas under major drought conditions. They had to figure out how they were going to feed cattle, and that meant they had to ship and feed. And if you're shipping and feed, you're already storing it, you're already feeding it in a controlled manner. So for them, a barn was a strategy to do that in the most efficient way. So that efficiency in the feed management, the better reproductive management is a huge part of putting in a barn as well. A lot of people that are looking at barns are trying to get higher value out of their animals. They already have really high quality genetics, and this is a way to really optimize that. And there's two sort of reasons that people are putting in a barn. They want to expand their herd, and they can't do it with more land, and bringing in another income to the farm. When I say bringing in another income, a lot of times that's a child coming back to the farm. Similar to any other confinement operation, this is an opportunity to have a second income stream on the farm that's not currently there. And there's real opportunities there. figuring out the budgets and making it work is sort of what we're all here to do today, but these are why people ask about barns. The one thing I ask people to do really early in this process is tell me what they're going to do with the barn. The animals that you're planning to confine in the barn will change the design of the barn, the spacing requirements, the bulk spacing, sizes, shapes, if you need creep areas, all these things will shift depending on the type of barn we want to build. And we don't really want to build a barn for everything. We want to build a barn specific to what our goals are in terms of management. So cows at calving, we might need to have some calving pens. We might need a little different kind of working facility if we're doing a lot of AI or doing transfer work. All these things play a role in how we design our barns. And if we're going to finish calving the barn, we have a whole different set of things that we have to deal with than a cow-calf operation. So try and make that decision really early in the process makes a big difference. One thing I did want to hit on today is we talk about cattle confinement, but we are in an area of feedlots here, and a feedlot is a cattle confinement as well. Technically, cattle confinement is any time that the cow is not on vegetation for 45 or more days. So we are specifically today talking about cattle confinement under roof. So I just want to make sure that people understand that when they say cattle confinement, the assumption here today is that we're talking about a barn, but in truth, any sort of confinement is a dry lot, in my area, a mud lot, or a lot. So something to keep in mind. Also, this is sort of an area of discussion, and I'll be curious to hear what some of the panels say about this, but a lot of people want a barn seasonally. They don't necessarily want to confine their cattle year-round. And figuring out how to make a barn heavy if you don't have cattle in there year-round is really challenging, but I do understand that people might have something like raising corn stalks that they want to do seasonally, which might lower their animal numbers in the barn. So there is certainly a game involved in figuring out cheap costs to feed, how to make that match your operation, your other land uses. I would prefer if people had a plan to use the barn all the time, but I understand that there are other options out there and people can make a lot of things work. And I am not the smartest person in the world. So, for dry lots, I want to point this out here. Dry lot spacing is usually very large. We're talking about hundreds of square feet per head in a lot. And the challenge here is that we end up with a lot of land that is uncovered, that doesn't have vegetation growing, and this is where we sometimes get challenged on environmental issues, which is why a lot of people are not looking to put in feedlots, especially for cow-calf right now. And if you're like me and you're from an area with 30 plus inches of rain, this is not an option at all. Strongly discourage anyone with a lot of rainfall from considering this. So the confinement we're going to really focus in on today is the barns. The first is the coop barn. The benefit of a coop barn is it's very light, properly designed, it has excellent ventilation. I personally find that it tends to not be a super wide barn. They just instinctively do not build coop barns that are 60 and 80 and 120 feet wide all the time, which means they tend to have pretty good airflow. Some people are upset by the idea of a coop barn because of the lifespan on the coop, on that curtain type material, that plastic material. So that's something you should be discussing with the company when you're purchasing a coop barn, is the type of warranty on that type of material, how it goes up, if you have to take out a piece, what you have to do. But they certainly are a good option. I am a fan from the visibility of the animals in the barn perspective. Gable barns. For me, as an engineer, a gable barn is one of the easiest barns to figure out ventilation on. The numbers are pretty well designed. We can usually predict ventilation rates well. Keys for gable barns are getting enough ridge opening. People instinctively want to narrow that ridge opening down at the top. Another challenge with them is people try to put metal on sidewalls that they do not need. We won't see that as much here, but in Kentucky they keep trying to do it to get rid of rainfall. Curtains, things like that are maybe a better strategy. And it depends on your area and what the construction looks like. Again, where I live, it tends to be the cheapest form of construction. So that is just a factor. We have a lot of Mennonites, and they're very familiar with building this farm. But it is a pretty standard construction strategy. So, and last but not least is the monoslope. Monoslope is a really nice design, provided you have the right airflows. It provides a lot of air movement. It's a very nice facility. And when we go into the ventilation part, I'll kind of discuss how it really takes advantage of wind-driven ventilation, because it does. But again, that depends on what your rules are. One of the other things that I think is really important to hit on early is manure management. And I hope we talk about manure management a bunch in the next couple of days, because to me this is probably one of those big decision makers really early in the process, is how you want to manage your manure. There are sort of three options on the table, probably two primary ones in this area of the country: a bedded pack, a slatted floor, liquid storage underneath. I put the third one up there because that's what we use in my area of the country, compost bedded pack. But Minnesota does quite a bit of compost bedded pack work as well, so there's always that option. Important questions to ask yourself about how you expect to manage manure. To me, this is probably one of those critical things, because your manure could be valuable on your operation, but the level of value you associate with manure will depend upon how you plan to utilize it. Do you have crop ground? Do you need to spread fertilizer? Do you have high quality hay ground? Do you need to spread fertilizer? Can you utilize your manure from this operation effectively and gain the most economic benefits from it? If so, it should be a serious part of your consideration in how you're managing your barn. I also put up here, do you have the equipment to manage the manure? It takes a lot of work to move some of this manure out of the barn. For instance, if you're not in an area where you can pump manure well, a slatted floor liquid system might not be your best strategy, because then you're pumping it out in a tank. It's a long process to move manure that way. Or maybe you don't have a good side spreader in your area and you can't move very much manure if you pull out your bedded pack. And then again, what sort of bedding materials do you have available? What you're using in combination with things coming out of the back of the animals will affect the quality of that manure product. And so for a bedded pack barn, these are things that you should have sort of lined up ahead of time, because from an operational standpoint, the cost of bedding can be a challenge if you don't have enough in the middle of winter and you need to dry out a barn. Oh, and what labor do you have? Yeah. So labor costs can be quite high at certain times of the year. Trying to spread manure at the same time that you're trying to do something else on the crop side of the operation can be a challenge, making sure that you have labor available when you're planning to spread the manure. And then how often do you want to clean out all of that barn? Your feed alley areas are going to be scraped almost continuously. Your deep bedded barns, you might only be cleaning out once a year, maybe twice a year, depending on when that land is available. And figuring out how to have the right storage capacities in those areas is a big deal, because the last thing you want to do is run out of space to store it. The next thing I want to sort of touch on here is the spacing in the barn. For bedded barns, there's some numbers out there for recommended spacing. I will say this, that for cow-calf pairs, they put 80 to 120 square feet as a spacing number. I tend to fall on the high end of those numbers. I prefer a little bit more space for a cow-calf pair. And when I look at the research and why that number was chosen, it seems to be based on bunk space designs and the typical widths of the barns. For dry cows, there's numbers that are quite small out there, 25 to 30 square feet, but they also have run-ins associated with those areas, so that I think is still an underestimate. And about 40 to 50 square foot for dairy heifers, larger dairy heifers, but still not full-size cows. And then for calves after weaning, 20 to 25 or 25 square feet. And for slatted barns, There are numbers here for both dry cows and for calves that I've listed here. You'll note that I don't have cow-calf pairs listed here because I am not recommending cow-calf pairs on slats. So I sort of touched on that feed bump on the last slide here. To me, this is one of those big, critical design considerations, and one of the reasons that I said that the first thing you need to do is pick the type of animal you're putting in a barn, because the bumps that you need are going to vary based upon the animals you're putting in the barn. A lot of times people that are putting cows in a barn are putting in a higher forage ration. It tends to be bulkier, they need larger bumps. And those cows need pretty good bump space to make sure they can all eat at once, and that all the cows are getting all the nutrients. They say 24 to 36 inches. I always say 36 inches because I really want to see calves eating. And if the calves can't get to the bunk, they don't learn to eat early. And one of the benefits of a barn is that those calves start eating early, and by a month of age, 90 days of age, they'll be eating 1% of their body weight on that diet. That means we can get better growth on them. It means we can wean more easily. It means those calves are going to stay healthy in that barn. If we're not giving that 36 inches of bump space, we need to be feeding them somewhere. It's critical. The other thing I will say is that some of the initial recommendations were for a cow-calf pair, 4 times the area you would give a feeder in your area. So if you know what a typical feeder bump space looks like in your area, and you multiply it by 4, you come up with a similar number for a cow-calf pair, which I kind of like as a rule of thumb. I put the feeder numbers in there with a pretty large range, 9 inches up to 18 inches. 18 is more of a receiving number, just to get them all to put their heads down. 9 inches, if they certainly can be pushed to, but as they get really big, you might have to back that again. But the other thing I have here is bump height. And the reason I put these numbers up here is because if I put a cow up to a bump, I could put a nice deep bump in front of a cow and she'll eat really well. She has a 22 to 24 inch height over which she can reach and put her head all the way back down. So they're very comfortable eating out of the bump. Similarly, feeders will feed out of a very similar bump, 20 to 22 inches. But calves have a height of about 18 inches. And anything higher than 18 inches, they can't reach over it and put their head down and eat. So if we're going to put in these really big bumps on these really high J-bumps with a high wall, sometimes it's a struggle to get those calves to start eating, especially if we don't give them some form of a curb to step up on to maybe get their head into that bump. The other things about feed bumps and cattle, size, age, weight variability will increase the competition and aggression. If you've got 1,500 pound cows and 1,000 pound cows right up next to each other, typically the 1,500 pound cow is going to push the 1,000 pound cow out of the way to get what it needs. So one of the things about putting animals in a barn, already you're trying to optimize your genetics and your efficiency in the barn, you're going to probably end up with similar looking cattle in your barn. That should be one of your goals, is to have a very uniform herd in a barn with uniform feed needs so that they all sort of maintain similarly. You're always going to have young heifers that need a little different diet or older cows, but your goal is to try and get some uniformity so that they grow and maintain on the same diet. And usually they get a lot more roughage than the feeders do, so they need a little more bump space. One of the big benefits, and I hope we talk about this later, of moving to this barn is that we can really optimize rations. And this is, I think, where a lot of people are able to make the payment on a barn make sense. The other real benefit here is that these calves wean much earlier, or they potentially could wean much earlier, but they need access to that feed bump to be able to be trained to do so. There's some data out of Minnesota that says that they weaned calves in the barn, 30 or 60 pounds lighter than they did off of pasture. But they immediately gained that weight back because they did not have the slump that they would typically see when they're weaning a calf off the pasture, because they immediately started eating feed and eating and gaining. So by the time they were sold, they were still at the same weight as those that were out on pasture. Actually, they're a little bit higher at the end. On top of feed, the other thing I wanted to note here is water volumes. It's important, especially in the barn, that we get our water rates right, that we have enough watering space in the barn. We're basically putting them on a not wet diet, not grass, and therefore we're asking them to get most of their water from the trough in the pen with them. So we need to make sure that that trough does what it needs to get them enough water, especially in hot weather. There's a lot of numbers sort of out there for how much space an animal needs at a trough. But the one thing I wanted to note here is that I think it has a lot less to do with space at the trough as much as it has to do with capacity of the water tank and refill rate. If I've got a big water tank with lots of capacity and it refills quickly, I'm never going to really have a problem getting my cattle to drink the way they need to. If I struggle with refill rate, I need larger capacity tanks. That is just the way life works. The higher the dry matter intake, which is what we often have in the barn, the higher the water requirements. And we really want a full day's water supply to show up in that barn in 4 hours. So we really want that barn to refill water quickly enough that all those cattle get to drink when they want to, because that means they hit the bunks the way we need them to. And similar to the feed trough, or the feed bunk, the water trough height for a cow is not the right height for a calf. So we want to be really cognizant that we put in a trough where the calf also can drink water and figure out how to drink out of the trough. They'll figure it out, but the higher it is, the more challenging it's going to be for those calves to get onto water. And I just put this up here. This is 3 different water companies, and they're all giving you specifications on their water troughs. And they all basically have a very similar head capacity. But what you'll notice here is that the capacity of the tank right above the herd capacity there, one of those has 20 gallons, one has 60 gallons, and one has 28 gallons. What that means is that when that trough is filled, that's how much water is in the trough that can be drank down while it's refilling itself. So if I have low water pressure or a smaller pump, I might need to go to something like a 60-gallon capacity tank so that it can refill, so that I don't run out of water when they're all trying to drink. Because their aggression towards going to the tank at the same time will be lower in a barn than it will if they're walking miles to water, but they're still going to all want to drink together because the behavior of cattle says they want to drink one behind the other. And you'll watch them do it on pasture, but you'll also watch cattle do it in the pen. After they eat, they all go up to drink. And so the water being there is really important for making sure their stomachs ruminate the way we want them to. So we need to make sure we get that right. With regard to that manure management and the flooring, footing, we don't want super dry, dusty conditions in a barn. That can cause respiratory issues. But we really, really don't want wet, muddy conditions in a barn either. Where I live, we have lots of mud, lots of inefficiencies in our winter weight gains. Mud is not good for getting weight on animals or maintaining weight on animals. And so if we put them into muddy, wet conditions, we're really just knocking ourselves down at the knees. They really can't do what they need to do if they're working against mud or muck and it's not dry enough for them to stand on. Calves in particular really need dry bedding. It does a lot to help manage disease in those barns. And this is why I couldn't have a cow-calf number on a slided floor. If we go to a slided floor situation, cows, bigger feeders, have a really nice spacing between the slats, 1.5 to 1 3/4 inches. Calves can only go to about 1 1/4 inches, where they start to get their hoofs caught between the slats. And if they go to that 1 1/4 inch for the calf, the cow shit does not slide through the slats the way we want it to. They don't stomp it through. It stays dirty. So we have sort of this fine balance that we can't quite get the slats right for cow-calf pairs to be really effective on slatted ground. We can make it work, but it's not ideal. These are just some basic ventilation numbers, and I'm not expecting that you're going to figure out what your ventilation looks like in your barn on a CFM basis. That's my job. But what I want to point out here is that in the wintertime, these animals, even though sometimes people assume that they don't have that much ventilation requirement, the numbers are still actually quite high for beef cattle in a barn in the wintertime. We still have to move a lot of air. So we really do have to be cognizant of our barn design to make sure we can do that. And we're going to try and do it with natural ventilation because we don't want to pay for electricity. There's two styles of natural ventilation, buoyancy and wind-driven. Wind-driven basically assumes that there's enough airflow in the area and it's going to cross the barn and it's going to put fresh air all the way across the barn all the time. Buoyancy is what we use if we drop a curtain so that the wind can't go across the sidewalls. And it's how we move air typically for winter ventilation numbers. I call that the chimney effect. And in order for the chimney effect to work, we have to have animals in the barn that heat up the air. So we need to have a little bit of rising temperature in the barn when we're outside. We need to have some form of an opening on the sidewall, eave openings at least, even if we close up our curtains. We need to have an opening at the top of the barn. That's the ridge vent. And the height between the opening on the sidewall where the air comes in and the opening at the top where the air goes out has to be enough to drive that process. It's the same reason that if you put a chimney into a house, the taller the chimney, the better it drags. The same concept works for buoyancy in a barn. It's the reason that a flat roof doesn't typically have good ventilation for animals. These are examples of ridge eave openings, and you can see here that even with that curtain down, there's still probably about 24 inches on this eave opening here. And that ridge opening is along the whole length there on those openings. For wind-driven, we really just have to have enough sidewall opening. So there's nothing really shocking about this. If our sidewalls are wide open on both sides and our barn is oriented to take wind from the north and the south in this area, it will work fairly well, provided we have the right wind speed and direction. Most of the upper Midwest, most of this region receives winds in January in the wintertime from the north. Not everywhere. I'm assuming, but I'm not adamant that you have that wind speed and direction that I'm describing here. If you have this, it's really nice because you can close with curtains your north wall to get some of these cold winds to stop blowing through your barns. But then you can open it up in the summertime, and the winds from the south that are sort of predominant in this Midwest region will blow right across the barn. And it works pretty well. And it is the strategy by which a monoslope is really effective. In a monoslope, we hope that the winds will come from the south all summer, and as they go through that barn, that gets narrower and narrower, the airspeed will actually increase through the barn, which in theory will increase our cooling effects in the summertime. And in the wintertime, we can really close up that north wall and really restrict the amount of airflow that goes through the barn. I will say that I think on cow-calf operations, we probably don't need to hit quite this number that we sometimes can achieve. But for feeders, there are some benefits to this. But I will say that a properly designed gabled or hoop barn will move plenty of air as well. If it's oriented correctly and the openings are properly sized, any of these barns are able to provide adequate ventilation. And improperly designed, they can all fail miserably, unfortunately. One of the areas where people really mess up on ventilation is barn separations. They will put a barn right next to another barn, and not provide enough space between the barns to really allow the air to sort of redevelop into a normal wind pattern before it reaches the second barn. To keep in mind is that we probably want to think about how we're going to keep slow-moving young calves away from some bully or some aggressive cows, especially in the bump area. Are we giving those calves proper access to feed and water? And are we giving them the right protection from weather? We need some of those airspeeds for cows, but maybe the cows don't need the same airspeed. Options are to consider creep areas. I strongly encourage people to consider creep areas. I actually have a gentleman near me that has a creep field. So he gives his animals, when the weather is good, access to a creep field right next to the barn, where just the cows can go to get out in the sun. And I don't have a good picture of it, unfortunately. But I think some of the creep area is probably a good strategy. The creep area can have additional bedding. You could do supplemental feeding. You can give it extra protection from the wind, higher wall to give them a little bit less drafting. And most importantly, an area where the cattle can't go, where they don't have to pay attention to what the cows are doing. They can lay there and not really be worried that a cow's going to step on them. Most cows are pretty cognizant of the calves, but they find out the wrong way that the calf wasn't paying attention. So, final thoughts for managing cattle in confinement. I said labor increases. I'm not entirely sure that the total amount of labor increases. I would say every day your expected chores might take a little longer, but they're also easier to anticipate. So you sort of know what your daily role is going to be and the time it's going to take to do those things. And depending on how you're managing now, that might be more labor, it might be the same labor. But if you mismanage a barn, the negative consequences will show up quicker and they will be more significant. One of the real benefits, I think, is that a lot of people I know that have cattle in confinement really enjoy managing and understanding each animal and getting the most out of each animal. And it's a lot easier to be more precise and individual in management if you have cattle in a barn where you see them every day at the bump all the time. We can use some of the technologies at this point to really do some management, make some improvements. The economics on these barns really have to be evaluated based upon your site and your management style. Not any barn is going to be the same as any other barn. That is one of the beauties of the beef industry, is that we all raise cattle differently. And our outcomes and our goals are a little different. And so it's really hard to say this barn's going to pay or this barn's not without having that business plan that you've made yourself. And the other thing I will say is that cow, calf, and feeder are not really the same. That's not to say that either one is right or wrong, but a lot of people who are on the feeder side have traditionally done confinement. It just hasn't been on a roof. So they probably have a little more experience with some of the feeding and some of those management parts of the operation, where cow-calf might have had a more simple feeding style, not a TMR, not a least cost optimization quite the same way. That the feeder operations have done that. Plus, the cow-calf has to fight the two size animals, two different groups, the nutritional variations that happen with lactation, where feeders tend to grow and tend to just change sort of weight points, their diets. So with that, I will take any questions. Yes, sir. This is a very interesting question. Is there an optimal frame score if you're running cow-calf in a barn? Most people I talk to tend to go to a slightly smaller frame animal. One, it makes bump space a little bit more accessible if you're a little tight on bump space. Plus, there's some data that would suggest that they're a little more efficient on their feed. That data is not what I would call gender conclusive at this point. I think there are people that are very efficient animals that are larger too. The goal should be consistency. You can always match your animal numbers to your bump space or your bedded pack space to make that work. As long as you have consistency in the whole group, I think you have a much better chance to make the management match across the group. But most people end up smaller. That is just, it seems to be where they trend when they choose one. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of barns that will have these fans now, you know, for ventilation reasons. I mean, is that something like anyway what you're saying? Or is it still a benefit?
So you're asking whether you need fans for ventilation. So let me sort of explain how I approach ventilation. I am hoping in the summertime I have wind-driven ventilation with somewhere around 3 to 5 mile an hour wind all summer. If I don't have 3 to 5 mile an hour winds all summer, I have to depend on buoyancy to move my air, which means it's coming in from the sides and then going up through the roof. It's nice if I have good eave openings. Some of the hoop barns have the way that they're designed, they create a little bit of turbulence, which creates some airspeed, a little bit lower, which is nice. But ultimately, we can only move so much air through buoyancy, and it's typically more often than not designed to match winter ventilation. What this means is that we will have enough airflow that the barn's not going to climb to temperature 5 or 10 degrees above outside temperature, but it's certainly not going lower, and we're not getting the convective cooling that airspeed across the animal helps with. Where I live, we have fans for moisture management. We have to use them to get water out of the barn. And some people can get away without that. That's a really weird dynamic. So that the moisture management is a combination of airspeed, amount of bedding, and stocking density. The cooling capacity is just straight airspeed. So if you have an area, especially, you've got a lot of days in the summer where you think you have low air speeds, and you can look up a local windrows and actually determine how many days you have no airspeed in July and August, then you can make a decision whether or not you need fans in your area for those few days. Are they going to come off beat enough that it's going to be a challenge? Is it going to be hot enough, long enough that I'm going to have mortality? You know, those kind of questions you have to determine locally. And you can almost see what feedlots are doing in your area to figure out how tough that summer weather is in your area, how much water they're adding, what they're doing for management there. Are they putting in shades? You're already gaining the shade. That's the one good piece of news. But for some people, adding that fan reduces that heat stress. It helps reproductive performance. And depending on when you're trying to get things bred, that might be critical. But I would say you don't probably need it from a barn perspective, but you might want it specifically for what you're doing during that summer heat stress.
So would you say that the bottom slope for the gate of the roof has better ventilation overall? I mean, it probably depends on the width and stuff.
It's highly dependent on width. So the monoslope, typically the narrow side is still high enough to get really good airflow. And then the top side is extremely high, 30 plus feet. So yes, it's going to receive a lot of airflow from wind in the summertime. But if there's no wind, it still can't create that much airspeed. It can create a little bit more than the gable could on a really bad day. But if it's wide enough, the gable barns do really well if they're less than 60 feet and less wide. They just move air across fairly fluidly. Same thing with hoop barns. All of them move air across. Once we get past that 60-foot width, the width of the barn will really start to slow air that's crossing it. That's where things like the monoslope and stuff would be a design option to try and maintain higher airspeed across a really wide barn. Yep. Yes, sir.
Two parts. Number one, how much cooler is it in the barn just regular on a sunny day than it is with cows standing outside? Okay. And number two, we talked about the width of 60
so the first question was, let me answer the second one first. Can you make your sidewalls higher to increase airflow across a barn this wide? Yes. Yeah, most people try and hit 16 foot or 18 foot as sort of like that ideal eve height on a sidewall. Economically, it starts to get expensive to go a lot taller on your sidewalls. But yes, you can always make the barn taller. The way airflow works, it's like a parabolic shape, which basically means at ground level, there's almost no airflow. At chest level, there's significantly more. You go another chest level, 8 foot in the air. It's not like it's double what it is here, it's more than double. So the way that growth and airflow works, we gain a lot of airflow in those extra 2 or 4 feet we add onto the barn. It's not just, on 10 foot to 12 foot, it's not 2 feet more height isn't 20% more airflow, it's like 35. So extra height definitely helps us move more air across. It doesn't necessarily put air speed directly across the backs of the cattle though. So that is part of the challenge. Making it bigger means we get more cubic feet across the whole barn, but not necessarily a lot of air speed at cow level. And the other part of your question was, remind me again.
How much cooler is it in the barn on just a sunny day with cattle outside of the tree?
Right.
What's the difference in temperature?
Okay, so what is the difference in temperature? Air temperature-wise, not a lot. If you just measured air temperature, you'd see really basically no difference by putting the animals in a barn versus outside. Where we see real benefits is ground temperature. So if you had them on a dry lot outside, you could see ground temperatures at 120, 130 in the middle of summer. If they're in the barn, the ground temperature is going to be the ground temperature, which is probably going to match the air temperature because it's not receiving that solar load and then radiating it back up to the animals. On top of which, they're not directly receiving the solar load either. So it's going to feel cooler, but from a dry bulb temperature, if you put a thermometer in the barn or put it outside, it's not going to change drastically by having it in the barn. I would say, I'm trying to think what my numbers are on solar load. It might be somewhere in a 10 or 15% reduction in solar load during his hours. But the barn itself is always going to be just slightly warmer than the temperature outside. You might have a little bit of a lag depending on the kind of materials in the barn, but it's basically going to match the outside temperature plus the rear to the animals.
Well, thank you, Morgan. Let's give her another